Have you ever had the experience of falling fast and furious into a relationship with someone that just lights you up from your crown to your toes? And then inexplicably, about 3 months in, they suddenly pull back and want to take some space from you. Why and how does that happen? How could they have gone from so hot to so cold? And what do you do with that rejected feeling that you're left with? Well, that is what today's video clip is all about. Taken from a live stream Q&A event inside my private Facebook group, this clip examines that confusing scenario that happens when you get involved with a primarily avoidant partner who seems all in the beginning, but then after a few months is suddenly all out. In this video, we will explore how the Rolling Stone experiences and expresses their boundaries in relationship, the impact of enmeshment or dismissive family systems in childhood and on our nervous system, which impacts our partner selection in adulthood, how to conceptualize attachment styles, a habitual default for a frequency of attitude and behavior, and the differing needs and perceptions for deepening intimacy according to attachment style. By the end of this video, you will understand what to anticipate at the beginning of a relationship versus a few months in, why you should not use the first couple of months of a relationship as a gauge for a long-term commitment, how the avoidant Rolling Stone conceptualizes the switch from a fun fling to a long-term possibility. Now, before we dive into our clip, if you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Briana MacWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist with more than 15 years in the field, helping adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign so they can attract the soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want. And I do this using a psycho-spiritual approach to creative arts interventions, which I call the MacWilliam method. The content on my YouTube channel is derived from my online courses, which you can learn more about through the link in the caption of this video. If you would like to learn more about your attachment style, you can take the 4-question quiz. If you like what you see and hear and you want to learn more, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Okay, so let's dive into our content for today. So why is it that the Rolling Stone is able to bear and enjoy the connection and intimacy at the beginning of a relationship, but then they shut down after a few months? So this is boundaries. It's boundaries. Because the Rolling Stone, just as much as any other attachment style, wants to feel connected, wants to feel loved, wants to be saved from their isolation, wants to experience that euphoria of being seen and understood, sharing things, you know, all the good stuff that comes with being in companionship. Everybody wants that stuff, right? But what happens is there's this perception of Rolling Stones as having rigid boundaries, right? They say no, they withdraw, they withhold, they're aloof, they're inaccessible, yada, yada, yada. But what is important to understand is that Rolling Stones may have rigid, but they're fragile boundaries. So when you have something that is rigid, it can become brittle and therefore fragile. And so when you push too hard at it, it goes pfft. Actually, you don't even have to push that hard and it goes pfft, right? It fractures, falls over. So what happens is the Rolling Stone also struggles with boundaries. So people who have insecure attachment across the board don't understand boundaries usually, right? And that's the result of either enmeshment or dismissal, or both, right? So what happens is our nervous system gets stimulated when we experience enmeshment or dismissal. And remember, enmeshment is a form of dismissal. When you are enmeshed with someone, when someone is invading on you, emotionally speaking, even though they're all up in your grill, and you feel like that's like care and connection or what have you, they're also dismissing your autonomy. They're dismissing your assertion of self, right? And it's experienced as an invasion. So we think of invasion as intense attention, but it's an attention that also dismisses what's going on inside of you. So then we think of neglect as a dismissal because you're not as engaged, you're not as interested, you're not up in, you're sort of way out, right? And so therefore that feels like a dismissal, but they're both forms of dismissal. It's dismissal through neglect and it's dismissal through invasion, okay, or enmeshment. So So what happens is we choose, depending on our epigenetic inheritance, depending on our temperament, depending on the models that you had in your upbringing, depending on the environmental circumstances, depending on the consistency of the environments and the systems within which you grew up. Your nervous system decides fight or flight or freeze and fawn. Some of these, one of these, or some combination of these at whatever frequency and context is effective for getting what I need, right? And most of us choose consistent patterns and responses and coping mechanisms because our genetic inheritance, there's an aspect of temperament that is consistent. There have been evidence-based studies that show this, and because the systems in which we grow up are usually consistent. And systems don't like change. So we learn, our bodies and our brains and our synaptic pathways and our nervous system starts carving a groove that over time becomes habit, and so then we come to adopt these habits as aspects of identity. And we come to adopt these habits as defaults for how we respond to certain circumstances that our brain automatically categorizes through the amygdala and the hippocampus as a certain type of context requiring a specific type of habitual response. So when we talk about attachment styles, we're talking about a frequency of attitude and behavior. Now, people become identified with their attitudes and their behaviors, and that is when the ego is in profound operation, right? When we start connecting to spirit and we're using the creative experientials like the ones you experience in my online course, we're bypassing that. And we're starting to step into consciousness and awareness and a kind of spaciousness around our thoughts and our behaviors, because you're not your thoughts, you're not your behaviors. You're the part that reflects on your thoughts and your behaviors. And when you start to identify more with that part of yourself is when we start moving towards a secure orientation, right? The sovereign self, as I like to call it. So to bring this back to the question, why is it that the Rolling Stone can be all in and then all out? Because they are swept up in the moment, because they have been lonely and isolated for a while, and they meet someone and their fantasies of rescue and connection and union are alive and well, and maybe their partner senses what they really want, and so if they are a people pleaser, they may slip into accommodating that and taking in what the Rolling Stone is looking for because they want to become that, because they love being the focus of the Rolling Stone's attention and amorous affection, right? But what happens is, we can exist like that for so long, and then what happens is, like anything else in any other developmental evolving trajectory, things get deeper, things get more serious, you start to know them better. You start asking questions, you start thinking about things in the bigger picture. And what happens is after about 3 months, the Rolling Stone has been giving a lot because they're really excited, but they're also in the back of their mind being like, yeah, I can keep this up for X amount of time, but after that, I'm going to have to slow down a little bit if we're going to get into a regular rhythm. Whereas the other partner, in this case, whoever's asking the question, might be like, oh, things are going to keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're just going to keep rolling like an avalanche down this hill. There's a tendency to make promises, sort of unspoken promises, or at least that's how the partner receives them in the beginning, that you think it's always going to be this way. And for the Rolling Stone, it's like, no, now we have to find a way to balance this because I couldn't keep this up. You want me to keep this up, and now you want me to multiply it? You want me to make it even more serious, even more connected, even more this and that? Wow, I can't keep this up. You can keep this up? I can't keep this up. If that's what you want, then we definitely need to take a break because you're going to be disappointed, right? You are going to be disappointed. And if you think you're in love with that, that's not really me, right? That's infatuation. That's me being excited. That's like me enjoying the moment, but who I really am is something that exists on an even keel that needs a little more space in the long haul, right? And if that's not what you like, then we're not a good match. So this is sort of where expectations around what a relationship means to you. What is the structure of the relationship that you want to have? This is where the attachment system kicks on, right? Up until that point, it's a fling. Up until about 3 months into the relationship, you're just you're having fun, right? After 3 months, it's oh, we're hitting the 6 months, we're hitting the 6-month downslide now, right? 3 months, oh, this might start to get serious. The attachment system switches on, and whatever coping mechanisms have been carved into that groove, into your mind and into your body and into your habitual unconscious, they're going to turn on. Oh, now this person is super close. What does that mean? Now this person's asking for a more heavy commitment. Is that really what I want? You know, I mean, 3 months, you haven't really asked those questions yet. Now you're at 3 months. Well, I would say between 3 and 6, usually, depending. Then you start asking them. So it's always interesting to me when people want to compare the beginning of a relationship to like to a few months down the line. It's going to be different, obviously, because you're at different places. It's going to evolve. The evolution at phase 2 is going to be very different than evolution at phase 1, phase 3, phase 4, right? Because it's evolving and you're learning more. Right? So some people cling to like the first month or 2 of a relationship because they think that was the truth of the potential of the relationship. No. If anything, it's kind of the reverse, right? That was all the frosting on top. Now you get to eat the cake. And both of you are deciding, is this a cake I want to eat? Are these calories I want to carry? Right? I wish people would communicate like that at the beginning of the relationship. Really? Do you? Really? Because it doesn't apply at the beginning of the relationship. It doesn't. And when you say you want people to communicate like that at the beginning, you're kind of saying, I want you to tell me how it's going to turn out before I get there. So I can know for sure if this is worth my investment. And that answer doesn't exist in the world. Right? Yeah. I mean, emotional honesty is great, but a lot of people don't know their boundaries. A lot of people don't know how to be emotionally honest. That's why we do all the work that we've been doing in our live stream, especially last week, and like, you know, the work you're doing in your courses. They don't know. So the Rolling Stone has these sort of flimsy boundaries. They want to merge with you too, and you want to merge with them. And so you merge for the first 3 months. And then the attachment system kicks on, and it's just like, whoa, now this is getting serious. So now you're going to see the version of me that shows up to something serious, not something that's fun and new and exciting, right? Now you're going to see the version of me that shows up to something that may have long-term potential, and that could be a very different version of me. Does that make sense? Okay. It might feel like a rejection, but you might want to look at that. If you're feeling rejection, that's really good information for you, because how are you experiencing connection? Are you experiencing a lot of connection right away and then expecting that to be how it's going to be the whole time? And then when you realize that there's an evolutionary process and that it's going to have ups and downs, and that the beginning of a relationship and the phase of that initial spark is a very different experiential experience or subjective experience than how the relationship evolves over time. And I would argue that when you start to experience those first conflicts is actually the most exciting, because now you get to cut through all the romantic, pardon my French, BS, and you get to see who they really are, and you get to get into the nitty-gritty dirty stuff, right? And that's like the good chewy stuff, you know, and that's what we're learning how to navigate, sift, and sort and navigate in the courses that anyone who's here has purchased. So let's review what we have learned. In the beginning of the relationship, both parties are enthralled with each other and deep in the throes of infatuation. This can be very fun and exciting, and there can be a lot of pleasure in falling in fast and furious with each other. But it is important to also maintain your discernment and realize that the first few months are not necessarily a preview for what a long-term commitment might look like. Because after the first few months, you're becoming increasingly intimate, which causes the attachment system to switch on and trigger old default habits for dealing with the threat that intimacy implies, particularly for an avoidant Rolling Stone. At this phase of the evolution of the relationship, necessarily new, deeper, and more serious questions are now being considered, and your partner may not have the same needs, desires, expectations, or perceptions as you regarding the long-term potential of your relationship. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't allow yourself the pleasure of diving in head first, but it does mean that while you are swimming around in the deep end, it would be a benefit to remember your discernment and to remain grounded in an understanding of what you want from relationship in general so that you don't slip into compromising yourself to support an attachment to this specific person because you're wanting to exhume and cling to the first 3 months of what ultimately amounts to a fling. Remember, the world is full of possibilities of love, and you are entirely lovable just the way you are. Even if this person does not turn out to be your forever person, they are a successive approximation to whomever that might be. And the quicker you can let go of people who are not meant for you, the quicker you will find those that are. Now, before you go, if you liked today's video, please give me a like, a comment, and ring the bell for notifications. I read all comments and questions, and they inspire content for future videos. Thank you, and have a great week.